Hello friends, welcome to the MARE Podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the MARE project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy!
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the MARE Podcast. I am beyond excited to tell you that today our guest is Miss Sav. Hello, Sav.
Hello, George. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you. Honoured to be here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, me and Sav met in October of 2023,
Yes.
right? When we started our masters together in Oxford. And Sav was the cool kid because Sav did her undergrad in Oxford. So
I'm
she
sure that makes
knew,
everything cool.
yeah, she knew the places. She was like, we were all like super worried and anxious and wanting to meet people. And then Sav was like, yeah, been around the block for a while. So that gave us a big confidence boost that, oh, look at her. She's been here for 3 years and she survived and she's happy. So this must be a great place. Anyway, Sav, do you want to talk to us about you? Except for the fact that I completely spoiled that you studied in Oxford for your undergrad and your masters. Go.
No, that's thank you for doing the heavy lifting for me. So I British School of Academics. I have just graduated from my masters a couple months ago now. At time of recording, inside sort of behind the scenes, we record these much earlier than they get put out. So I graduated a couple of months ago. Loved it. Had a pretty good time at Oxford in general. Loved archaeology. So for my undergrad, I read classical archaeology and ancient history at Wadham College, and then I moved over to Linacre College to do my masters in archaeology. And I did the MSc in archaeology specifically.
Yeah, because we're scientists, right?
With science, well, more or less.
Yeah.
I like numbers and I like maths, so it was sort of had
Wow.
to do the MSc.
That's weird. That's kind of weird. So do you want to talk to us a bit about the undergrad? How is studying undergrad in Oxford? How does the system look like?
Yeah, so there are two major courses. I'm assuming that anyone listening to this is interested in archaeology or
Or
is about to be, or they should be. So the way the undergrad works is there are two major courses that you can study if you're interested in archaeology. It's archaeology and anthropology and classical archaeology and ancient history, which is what I did. And I came to it because I did Class Civ A-level. I went to a state school. We offered Class Civ. I was actually really lucky. I sort of stumbled into it because they were going to cut the subject because there just weren't enough people who were interested in doing it. And then I said, well, I'll be interested in doing it just to make up the course numbers. Really fell in love with it, and now I have done a master's in archaeology. But Oxford is a bit different to most other unis in the UK. It's a little bit more intense. You end up writing sort of 3 essays every 2 weeks, 2,000 to 2,500 words, in at least for classical archaeology and ancient history. I know a bit less about Arcananth because I didn't do it, but there's some overlap in the modules that you can do. So in your first year for classical archaeology and ancient history, CAR, as we can call it, in your first year you take 4 modules, 2 compulsory, 2 are optional, and then you choose 6 papers plus a dissertation to do over your next 2 years. So really good time for me. Ended up picking maritime archaeology for my finals papers, really fell in love with it, decided that I wasn't done doing archaeology, wasn't done studying, wasn't done being at Oxford, because also my first year was COVID, so I was sort of really hoping to have 3 years of normal uni as much as anything else, and chose to kind of continue with the research, continue studying.
Oh, well, wow, super nice. So what was the first thing you came across when it comes to maritime archaeology? What was the first topic you studied?
So the first thing,
I remember.
Yeah, well, actually, the first thing kind of goes before uni. And I was about 10, and we went on a school trip to see the Golden Hind. The replica ship that is in London. Would really recommend it. Great day out. Beautiful ship. We sang sea shanties. And then in what will later be sort of a full circle moment, I remember my brother getting really into playing Assassin's Creed Black Flag. which is, relevant for my research later, as George knows.
Ooh, spoiler alert.
But in terms of maritime archaeology, and also the other thing that I'm very interested in, so my background was in classical, it was in ancient history, but I've also always been interested in modern history as well. So something I'm very interested in is the history of empire. And the history of empire is something that you cannot divorce from maritime context. And I am sort of interested in world wars as well. So I think it was one of those things where maritime archaeology and maritime history was so integrated with lots of things I'd studied that it wasn't something that I'd actively thought about. Actually, I ended up choosing maritime archaeology a bit like how I ended up in archaeology in general, by fluke, where I wanted to take a paper, Egyptian art and archaeology, and they didn't offer that anymore. They'd like cut it for our year, or they couldn't run it in our year. I can't remember. I don't remember if it's back yet, but they couldn't run it for our year. And I knew I'd really fallen in love with the archaeology. I had studied the Uluburun in my Homeric archaeology module, which 10 out of 10 shipwreck, really interesting shipwreck. If I had to rate shipwrecks, pretty high up there. I also think that you can't study the Minoans without thinking about things like the flotilla fresco and all these wonderful like maritime nature. And octopus pots, man. Love an octopus pot. That's so
Love
cute.
an octopus pot.
They're
Right.
so cute. So I think I'd come across it in bits and pieces, but my first like actual bit of research in my maritime archaeology module was about legislation, and was
Legislation.
about legislation. That's the first essay that that Damien said.
Wow.
Who's
Damien?
Who's Damien?
Who's Damien?
He's still your supervisor, right?
Yes, he's still my supervisor.
Okay, yeah. He was our supervisor at Masters. Hi, Damien, if you're listening.
Is Damien listening? I should tell him to listen.
You should tell him to listen if he isn't.
Wow. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Legislation about like modern
modern legislation about shipwrecks and about the logistics of what are the laws about wreck protection, looking at the UNESCO conventions, looking at UK maritime law and salvage law, and it was one of these things that like, it's weird that that's the thing that really got me into it, but it was how tangible it was taught. Does that make sense? Like how tangible it was. Like we were thinking about logistics. We were thinking about the like how do you actually do maritime archaeology? How do you perform it? And then I was really lucky because there were a handful of us studying it, and so it was two students in each tutorial, which was great. And we got to choose what we were studying, because I think, I don't know, maybe there was 7 or 8 of us per year who were doing it. But yeah, really, really good fun. Really enjoyed it. And then got to study lots of different things. So I think we did everything from ethnography, because my tutorial partner was doing arc and ants, so we did some of the anthropology stuff as well. So I think we covered everything from ethnography to Indian Ocean trade, which I wrote a little bit about in my master's. And what else was great? I mean, all the logistical stuff, so experimental methods and deep sea salvage laws and all these like really interesting things we would end up building up on in the masters. And I was hooked. I fell in love with it completely.
Wow. So, and then you decided to pursue a master's in maritime archaeology.
Yeah.
So how was that? How was the experience of like doing a master's?
I think the experience of doing a master's really suited me. I think the thing about Oxford, for better and for worse, is that it's very old-fashioned, especially at the undergraduate level, in terms of the teaching methods. So I really enjoyed a lot of that. The tutorial system really worked for me. It's very small group teaching. I had quite a few modules where I was one-to-one, and so it means there's nowhere to hide, but it means that you end up learning very rigorously, which was fantastic, as someone who can be quite lazy if they would like to be. But it really worked for me. It really meant that it really gives me this really solid foundation. And then but the thing with it is that they still do everything by exams. So I only had one bit of coursework in the 3 years I was there, like one bit of significant coursework, even though we were writing these essays writing 3 essays every 2 weeks.
That's a lot of work. How big were those essays? Like 2,500 words each?
2,500 words. I think mine were normally about 2.2, 2.3. So it's a lot. You get very good at writing very quickly. So I think partly doing the masters. We can't my stuttering there. So I think doing the masters was easier for me, I think, than it was for other people in some ways, because I was used to the place, I was used to the system, I was used to the like output that you needed to have. But also it was coursework based rather than in my final year I had to do 6 papers and my dissertation, and they were all weighted equally. And the 6 exams were papers I'd taken, there was some papers that I'd taken at the start of second year that I had to then do the exam for in the third year. And the tutorial system was fantastic. I mean, some people in your year did that module that you did at the very start, at the very end. So there's no kind of parity almost.
I get it. Oh yeah, I can definitely double down on that Oxford teaches you how to do everything very quickly.
Yes.
You learn to be fast with research. And I think that it can be good, can be bad in some cases. That some may say that you don't go in insane depths about some things.
Yeah.
But you get very good at like picking out the important information and like synthesizing it, I think. Or that was my impression.
And I think you're completely right. I think the thing about doing that Oxbridge degree is that if you're not certain about the intensity, or if you're someone where the intensity really stresses you out, even if you would be perfectly capable of going, or even getting the grades or anything like that, it just might not be the place for you emotionally as much as anything else. Because you have to be able to put up with like an intense amount of pressure in very short terms. So, I mean, I loved it, and I loved the people I met, and I loved I did a lot of extracurriculars as well. I think that kept me sane. But, like, it is the sort of place where if you're ill for a week, that can completely mess up your term, especially
oh my God.
So the masters was kind of a breath of fresh air for me, because suddenly we were doing we didn't have as many essays. We were doing presentations mostly. It was all coursework based, so you had a lot of time to think about the things you were saying, think about the things you were writing, really go into depth. It teaches you how to be a good researcher. And I know that I will say that the presentations thing isn't a given. You want to look into how it's taught. I'm not going to be out here and say all masters students are going to.
Oh yeah. I think the presentation thing was us being 7.
There were 7 of us.
I think there was 7 of us. So it will be. I think it will be too much work for Damien to like mark 7 essays every week.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think
2 modules.
Yeah.
Because the most intense I ever had was in my first year, my Homeric archaeology module. We had a tutorial on a Tuesday and we had a tutorial on a Thursday, because it was in my final term. So then we were doubling up on our tutorials for the same module, just so you'd have enough time to like revise for your exams at the end of first year. And it was, you'd write your essay for Tuesday, and then on Tuesday you would get the essay to question for Thursday. And so Wednesday you would just be like, Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday was just like,
wow,
in the library.
Wow, that sounds intense.
Yeah, like every time I look at a can of Monster Energy, I think about Homeric archaeology, which is maybe not like the link that you.
That's the title for the episode.
Oh yeah. I'm not sponsored, but if they would like me to be.
I hope they listen to it and they can sponsor you. So during the undergrad, did you have to do all the work during the holidays as well, between the terms, or is it just like 1 or 2 weeks of exams and then holidays?
So the way it would work is that you wouldn't generally be set coursework or anything over the holidays. It's not like the masters where you basically don't get a break during the 1-year masters. That is the only other thing. It's like you'll do all your research during term, and then you get told, okay, your coursework deadline's in January. Go in and enjoy yourself for 6 weeks in the library, which is intense in its own way, as I'm sure George will attest.
Oh yeah, it's intense. It's 11 months non-stop.
Yeah, you don't
really non-stop. You don't get any time off. And I remember, I think we were supposed to submit our thesis in August, right? End of August. Something like that.
Yeah,
I think something like that. I remember by the beginning of August or the end of July, I had to email Damien and be like, Damien, I am really burning out. I'll take a week off. And I decided to give myself a week off because I was really like on the edge.
I mean, I was working last year as well.
Oh my God, yeah.
That is something really, I mean, And I think this is a podcast for early career researchers. It's expensive. A master's is expensive, and there is functionally no funding available if you're a master's student. And so it was a combination of, family support and work. And I was very lucky to have the family support. It's sort of, it was pretty intense. It was a pretty intense year for me. I was working,
Yeah, I know you were working, selling tea,
yeah.
and also doing
absolutely.
the masters.
Yeah, it was a pretty intense year. I mean, the thing about Oxford is that I'm very grateful for it, and I think I would not be as efficient a researcher, I think, is the thing I am looking to say. Like, I don't think I think that you can learn to be a good researcher at a lot of different places. And in the UK there are lots of very good archaeology departments. There are lots of really fantastic archaeology departments. I mean, I know more about the UK than I know about other countries, but like
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
it doesn't mean that like you are it doesn't mean that you will be a worse researcher if you go somewhere else. But it kind of teaches you to withstand pressure in a way that like I very few other places would. I mean, obviously,
Oh yes, of
Cambridge is
course.
structured in the same way, but like it is about that like it makes you it toughens you up, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, you have to. They have to keep up kind of the idea that it's not a walk in the park. If you're in it, you're in it. You're really in it. You can't just be halfway in it and think about it and not be sure. You have to be in it all the time.
And I know a lot of like really brilliant, very clever, very brilliant people who the system didn't work for. So it's like, and I think especially if you're 17 and you're doing your UCAS or anything like that, there is a certain expectation that if you're the sort of person who's getting 3 A stars, whatever, you're going to apply for Oxford or Cambridge. And I think it is really worth considering if the system works for you, and if you think the system is going to work for you, and they're not they're not the greatest places on earth, if that makes sense. Like,
oh yes,
I'm so grateful. It's a really weird line to walk, because on the one hand, I'm so grateful, but I am so aware of the flaws of the institution at the same time. Like,
yes,
I definitely would not be the person that I am without having gone to, Oxford for the last, without having like become an adult basically in those. But I think that, well, I'm not applying there for a PhD, I like,
you spent the last 4 years. You're allowed to like go somewhere else.
Yeah. I think that also, it trains you for a particular type of research because of the culture of intensity, which is cool, and it does make you a very good, you will be a good researcher by the end of it. But also, I am excited to go literally anywhere else.
Literally anywhere else. I remember before coming to Oxford, someone telling me, "Yes, Oxford, it either makes you or breaks you.
Yeah,
that there's no in between. You will then shine through it, or like you'll give up and say that's not for me and just move on with your life." But you've pointed two very important things. One of which is funding.
Yes,
and the absence of funding. And I think I do believe that this is something that is even intensified in the humanities or social sciences, whatever archaeology is, rather than in STEM. I would say, I don't know if you feel the same.
Yes. So I find it really interesting because, so the thing I'm up to at the moment is applying for PhDs. I say applying, I've actually, not to brag, I've gotten offers from everywhere I've applied to. I'm very, I know, right? But I can't
the Oxford aura for you.
Be excited about it, right? Because I don't know if I'm going to get funding. And I can't let myself be, like, as an obviously very proud, very excited. It's extremely flattering that people want to, work on my research, and that are willing to like give me a chance on that front. But also, I don't know if I'm going to get funding, and I don't really want to do it without funding. And a lot of the advice I've been given is that doing an unfunded PhD is not the easiest path.
No,
it's the sort of is the advice I've been given. And like, I've thought about options. I've thought about, maybe working and doing it part-time if I don't get funded. But honestly, I am not sure. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with it. And it's a bit of a shame because it's just that funding is getting tighter and tighter in this country. And I, until I was like 17, thought I was going to be a biochemist. I thought I was going into a very like heavy STEM pathway. I've got a lot of mates who are doing PhDs in other subjects, and while funding is tough everywhere, it is especially tough if you're in the humanities and social sciences. And I think the thing about being in the humanities that we've got to think about is it isn't just, isn't just historians. You're also competing, if there's a pool, you're competing with people who are studying English, you're competing with people who are studying the languages, you're competing with people who are studying geography. Is geography a social science? I don't know, it depends on your project.
Yeah, it depends. But I think it's the same as like psychology and sociology and like all that kind of stuff.
Generally. But yeah, like you're competing with people who are studying history, you're competing with ancient historians, you're competing with so many more people for the same, like, quite small pot of money.
Of course.
So it's the other thing I've been told quite a lot is that if you don't get into the PhD or if you don't get funding, it isn't a reflection of you as a scholar, it isn't a reflection of your ability to research. There just isn't that much money going around. And so honestly, like, it's a bit hard to know exactly almost what to say about like my career progression at the minute or whatever, because there are so many uncertainties. I'm in this like really interesting part of like waiting, and that I won't know. I mean, we're recording this in February. I'll find out if I'm through for funding in March, and through for a round, and then for another round in April. So I won't know. There's a good chance that I won't know even when the comes out.
I love how you use the word. I'm in an interesting phase.
Interesting phase.
Instead of any other word, instead of interesting. But sure, we'll go for interesting.
That's all right. Admin.
Wow. No.
Phase of my life. But that's all right.
Yeah, and it comes as like, I think there's fewer funding in the humanities, especially in the UK, and it comes as kind of a contrast to mainland Europe, where due to EU laws, not funding, but like fees to study there are like much less.
Yes.
What's going on in the UK?
And this is a really weird one because Brexit happened when I was 14, and it's I've got a brother who's 5 years older than me, and almost our experiences have been so like different. And he did physics. He was I was gonna say more sensible, but I'm trying to not do that actually, because archaeology is so worthwhile and important.
True.
I'm kind of sick of seeing people in our fields talk them down as if they're not as important as STEM, because I'm like, absolutely not. Actually, our fields are super important and super interesting and just valuable to engage with, that I don't want to talk us down. But our experiences have been totally different, and seeing, lots of economic reasons for there being less funding, but also like things being valued less. I don't know, it's a hard one.
Oh yeah.
And that's also something that's kind of, inspired part of my research, I think.
True. But before we go there, I also want to, since you mentioned like the PhDs and like being in that phase of your life where you're applying for stuff and you're looking for a job or a PhD or anything, and you mentioned before that how Oxford made you the person that you are now, and I wanted to like kind of ask the question of what was the tools or the qualities that Oxford gave you, except for the academic ones of like, I am reading fast and I can write faster. What do you think it's the thing that the tools that Oxford gave you to go into the world and like chase jobs? And I think you chase a lot of jobs in the creative world as well, because you are very, very talented in singing, dancing, acting.
Oh, I can't.
Crocheting.
I'm not. But
you are.
But it's great. I mean, I love drama, but I did a lot of that. I did something stupid, like 26 shows while at Oxford, in like a lot of different roles. If you like uni drama, Oxford is a good uni to go to if you want to like do that outside of you don't want to go to drama school, but you want to have like a good time doing a lot of theatre, or a stressful time doing a lot of theatre. It depends on how seriously you take it. I think that what it gives you, and it feels so cliche to use this word, because also I went to a school where they would say this word every single assembly, but it is that resilience. It's like getting through and not giving up. I think that's something that it really gave me. I think I touched on it earlier, but the tutorial system means that there is really no place to hide. And depending on your tutors, you can get told pretty firmly that you are wrong. You can get some question marks on the sides of your essays. You can get some absolutely not. I think it teaches you how to engage and how to defend your ideas as well. And I mean, obviously, like, not to, you need to be realistic about things, and that is the name, right? Like, we would be wrong to say that the saying that you went to Oxford doesn't,
Yeah,
help
of course.
cause or help, turn a couple heads. I mean, I know it makes people take me more seriously. Like, even anecdotally, I definitely have had interactions in my life where I've been talking to people, maybe, family friends, whatever, and they're like, "Oh, what did you do?" And I said, "Well, I did archaeology," and that's also not very conventional. I think, especially for, like, I'm South Asian, it's not the most conventional career choice. It's not the most conventional path, and so there is that, like, oh, and then you say, and I went to Oxford, because when they ask where, and it's like, oh, I went to Oxford, and they go like, oh, and suddenly the tone changes, and
Yeah, take it more seriously.
yeah, they take
Oh,
it a bit
you're
more
one of the smart
seriously.
ones.
Oh yeah, you're not thick.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I think it links to this, like, complete devaluing of the humanities and devaluing of the social sciences that it just annoys me, to be honest,
Oh,
more
yeah.
than anything else. But I think it also speaks to, like, the cultural reputation of Oxford as an institution, which, I mean, there's part of me that, like, obviously I don't agree with people who are like, it's the best place on earth and you're not, whatever. Like, it's a lot of it. Sorry, I thought I wasn't going to swear. I can say, let me do that again. Let me do that again.
Okay, do it again.
Do it again. Which is rubbish. It's rubbish. It's not true. And it's not true that it's the only place to get valuable education or anything like that. But also, clearly I buy into it a little bit because I went there. So I don't know. I go back and forth on it in my own head. I think I think about things slightly too much.
Oh, that's all right. It's okay to think about things too much sometimes. But you talked to us about, and I think it's funny. You talked to us about being South Asian, and I don't think that people will get that from your heavy London accent. So
Right.
do you want to talk to us about where you're from? Did that, where your family's from, and did that impact you on choosing this career path, or like it didn't have any effect at all?
I think that's a really interesting question because I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I think my family certainly had an impact on what I ended up doing. I mean, my mum likes to say it's because we used to listen to Greek myths in the car. But I think the older that I get, the more I am very interested in the history of migration. I said earlier, I'm very interested in the history of empire. And my family have gone through, they were in India, we're originally from India, from Punjab, and then we went kind of via Kenya. We were in Kenya for a very long time. Like, my grandparents, I think, were born there, they grew up there, that sort of thing. And so, and then my parents moved here in, like, the 70s and the 80s. So there's been a couple steps of this of migration, and a lot of it is inextricable from the British Empire and, like, why people end up moving, and, like, almost these long boat journeys that my grandparents had to make. They've been a part of the, like, family history, the family psyche for a very long time. And so I think something I am very interested in is the movement of people. But then also, I was born in London, I grew up in London, I'm from around here, it's I say around here like we're in the same place. We're not even in the same city. Without that.
Pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. Pretty close. Like,
we're not that far.
No, it's like an hour away. But I think that is something that I found really interesting then studying harbour communities. I'm super interested in harbour communities as, like, a space, because you see this, like, mixing of cultures. You see, like, a range of people. You see a lot of disparate people coming together to form unique cultures. And I think anyone who's been in London is very aware of the fact that this is a very similar space. You see the meeting and melding of a lot of different cultures, and I think that's really wonderful. And that is also something that obviously has been problematized and continues to be problematized in literature at the minute, but I think there is sometimes a simplification. So a piece of coursework I did earlier this year was about the trading relationship between ancient Rome and South India, which in the 1st to 3rd centuries AD. Fascinating topic. And something that I was sort of thinking quite a lot about when I wrote that piece of coursework is that the way early scholars worked was they used, they were sort of looking for traces of Romanness in India, as opposed to studying the site as like its own space, and studying the site as, an Indian site, or studying it as a hybrid site, studying it as on its own merit. And instead, they were looking for traces of this Western thing in India. So I think it gives you a perspective, maybe that it's easier to like critique, I suppose, when you understand the experience a little bit more of like being, and I'm not going to say other because I've never really felt other. I'm from here. I grew up here, but I think of growing up not in the dominant culture and having your own things going on, but still being a full participant and member of your local culture. So I think it does sort of end up linking you to maritime archaeology in that. It sort of ended up linking me.
True. No, it does.
Informing my research, I think, in that sense.
Oh yeah, it does. And I just came to my mind something that I've seen recently and thought of you. In the British Academy, on the 6th of December, there was the Honor Frost lecture about Berenike in Egypt. And it was about the connection between the Roman settlement in Berenike and India. And it was very interesting to see that they took the professor I'm trying to think of his name. He talked about signs of India in Berenike instead of like Roman materials in India.
So in one of my other essays, I was talking about harder infrastructure, and I talked about Berenike quite extensively. Love that site. Excellent site. Just so interesting. So wonderful if you're hoping to study infrastructure. Wonderful if you want to look at historical examples of creolization. Wonderful, like just a really interesting site. There are, if you're interested in food, there's a lot of food preservation there. If you're interested in religion, there's a lot of really interesting religious sites there. There's a pet cemetery.
Yes, there's a pet cemetery.
So interesting. Love that site. 10 out of 10.
Oh yeah, I think the lecture is online. You can definitely check it out in the Honor Frost website. Anyone can check it out. It was a brilliant lecture, and they also found a ship name, which I found super interesting. And I went to him after the lecture, and I was like, so about that ship name, where did you find it? And he was like, I'm gonna send you an email with bibliography. I was like, thank you very much.
I mean, if he's as good in person as he is, like as his books are, like that was a real treat. His books are fantastic. I think there are relatively few scholars who can make excavation reports both accessible and interesting. I think excavation reports are like dry, and I think
dry, yeah.
Respect for the people who can make them interesting.
Yeah, they were written just for you to go to a certain page and look at a certain part of that page and not read it. That thing is unreadable. Yeah. Anyway, but enough about Berenike. People, I'm sure they can check out Berenike afterwards.
And any books that Simon has written, if you're interested in the site, very worth reading.
Very,
very
worth
reading.
True. So let's go to, since we talk about research, let's go to your research, your amazing research. And I say amazing because I got a chance to read it, of course, and it was brilliant. So walk us through the process of coming up with a research proposal about what you wrote and what you end up doing.
So you have to come up with an idea for your thesis, or at least a rough idea for your thesis when you're applying. And I was juggling with a couple different ideas, some of which I ended up doing in other pieces of coursework. So that Rome and India connection was something I'd looked at a bit undergrad, but was more interested in looking at in postgrad. So I did that for a piece of coursework instead of doing it for my full thesis. Similarly, I looked at figureheads from the Kai's Ark, If you go to the Long John Silver collection, it's bottom floor of the Kaisark. It looks a little bit haunted, but fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Okay. Let's take a note of that and talk about it. So we'll talk figureheads after your thesis. Go.
We'll talk figureheads after my thesis. Fantastic. And the other thing that I spent a lot of time thinking about was video games and was media, which is one of these things that seems like a very sort of esoteric, like how we ended up here. But, you know, we'll take our pen out of our conversation, was that my brother played Assassin's Creed Black Flag in like 2013, of course, when it came out in 2013. You know, he's 5 years older than me. Everything he ever did has made like a huge impression on me. But it was one of those things where the more I did archaeology, the more I am convinced, and let me restart that. When I was doing my undergrad, we noticed that there were loads more people applying year on year who were about our age. My age. You're so old.
Oh my god, you didn't need to do that.
It's important that the people know. We like to make fun of George because he was like very slightly older than us. Because that was so.
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny. I'm 80 years old.
You are 80 years old, as per your birthday card. And you look great. You look fantastic today.
You look great too.
Thank you. I wasn't fishing. But it was something that we noticed, though. It was like lots of people, especially from state schools, people from non-traditional backgrounds who maybe wouldn't have applied a couple of years earlier, were applying. And were applying in sort of fairly significant numbers. Like, it was a very small course. There were 20 on my 25 people, 20 to 25 people on my undergrad course. That is about the same size as the masters. I think there were 21 of us on the masters. And I genuinely believe that pop culture has a huge impact on that. And in my head, I'm calling it the Percy Jackson effect. Because it gets kids into Greek mythology, right? And we are the age with that demographic. I mean, different for you, obviously, because you grew up in cyberspace.
Here we go.
Very different. No, but
That's my fault. That's my fault. Oh,
as in terms of the Percy Jackson thing, it was probably less significant because you actually grew up in a place where it's culturally, you know.
Yeah, Percy Jackson is not really a thing.
Exactly, right? We wouldn't need.
Yeah.
But here it was. And like, I think that sort of way into engaging with, and it was something we noticed, it was something we talked about, and it was sort of a definitive way into studying and being interested in the ancient world and being interested in studying archaeology. It is that like pop culture almost that buys people in. And I remember I had a tutor who was saying that he'd also been to state school, and he was saying that it was video games that took him in. And the more I was thinking about it, and you know, Assassin's Creed Odyssey had come out a couple of years before I started uni, like when I was in sixth form, and I was like, this is fantastic. It's a way that people are engaging with the subject. And it was just more and more, I was like, how do people engage with archaeology? And it's not through academia. There are relatively few of us in academia, because one of the things that I think people have said to me a lot, I'm sure they've said it to you a lot when you say that you study archaeology, was like, oh, I wanted to do that when I was a child.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
True.
right? When I was a child is like the default statement for I wanted to study archaeology.
When I was naive, I wanted to do archaeology, but now I grew up and I
would grow up and I know I should do something sensible instead. And it's like, you know, obviously we can complain about that as, you know, people not taking our work seriously, but what I do think it shows is this genuine interest and love and engagement with archaeology that comes from this like pop culture space and comes from media. There's this great quote by Holtorf, I'm pretty sure, where he goes that academic archaeology as a discipline owes its existence to media. I think I'm paraphrasing, but owes its existence to pop cultural like representations of archaeology, because you're probably going to engage with it because of Indiana Jones or Lara Croft or you know, Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, there are lots of pieces of media where you can sit there and you can go, man, boats are really cool. I'm going to learn about those, you know, Master and Commander. There is so much research out there. And then I think master's thesis, by necessity, you've got to, you know, narrow it more than you would maybe expect. I definitely had to go through quite a few iterations of my question because I just kept wanting to talk about everything. And And I do think that's a great benefit of studying maritime archaeology as a discipline. You kind of get to study everything. Like, I studied, I think the like periods I studied, I definitely wrote about Bronze Age ships in my research, and I also wrote and I also did a piece of coursework on the submarine that the submersible that imploded a couple years ago now. So I literally went from 2000 BC to 2023.
Yeah,
And
something like that.
that's crazy. That's crazy. It's crazy that all of these things come under one umbrella. So I really love maritime archaeology for like giving me that as well, because I'm someone who wants to know everything I can. So
Oh yeah.
yeah. So
It kind of shows how maritime archaeology is like everywhere in terms of the chronology of like humans existing on Earth.
yeah,
It's not something that showed up like later.
no,
Connectivity and like trying to cross the sea was something that happened from the start.
yeah,
They wanted to do it.
yeah, and also just that the world has always been much more interconnected than you would maybe expect. I think there is this idea that like globalization happened, and that's when, you know, people moved around and the Wright brothers invented the plane, and then we were all, you know, flying about, and that's when we saw each other, ignoring the fact that for literally all of human existence, pretty much, we've been interested in traveling across the sea. I mean, you did some really interesting work on Polynesian navigational methods.
I
Remember?
did.
And that was a brilliant example of that sort of thing, where we like can go so far back and see all these different methods for traveling by sea.
Oh yeah.
And it's just
People figured it out, right? Figured it out. They
out.
wanted to do it, and they had the need to do it, and they figured out how to do it correctly, so they can go and come back and know where they are, and just like have these mental maps in their heads of where we are and where we're going. The Polynesian navigation it's wonderful. I mean, I like barely understood it, because it's something that you need to do it in order to understand it. It's very hard to write on a book how the attack principle works, and how they will see the star and they will think of the other star in the clouds and the island, and they will use the islands as like points of navigation, and and it was like a whole complicated system.
Star maps. Like, I was a bit of a roundabout story, but I was in Sydney. I went to Australia after the degree, and I was in Sydney, and I was in the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and because of your talk, because since you gave that talk, which was at like the start of last year, I've been thinking about the attack principle. I've not been able to like, it's in here, you know, it's rattling around, and there's this beautiful installation that was a star map, like a traditional star chart, and I saw it and I was like, one, thought of you, but two was like, I instantly recognized it. And when you notice it, you notice maritime archaeology everywhere. It's very much the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, when you've like noticed that this is a thing that is so relevant to people, and that, especially on the scale of history, planes are new, planes are bright.
Oh yeah,
you know, planes are
very modern. It's a very modern invention.
Yeah, and so if you're interested in studying the movement of people, if you're interested in studying empire, if you're interested in studying infrastructure and why things happen and why things get built where they get built, if you're interested in where people settle, if you're interested in, I think, a lot of the big questions that come up when you do archaeology, maritime archaeology is something that is super important to understand, and maybe it's sort of an underrated, I think, place to understand it. And also, to tie it back to your original question, because I got you,
Nice.
it is very much this, like, it's something that you see a lot in pop culture, and you don't necessarily realize that that's what you're seeing. You don't necessarily realize that's what you're absorbing. But take, Pirates of the Caribbean, take, I was saying Master and Commander earlier, take a lot of games, Civilization, Return of the Obra Dinn, which I'll get into a bit more. But if I have one piece of advice for anyone who is listening to this podcast, who is interested in video games, who's interested in maritime archaeology, you have to play Return of the Obra Dinn. It's so good, and it's just fantastic. And I say that both as a fan and as someone who has studied the game from an archaeological perspective.
Oh
it's
yeah,
fantastic.
as an academic and a gamer.
As both an academic and a gamer.
it's a thing that 15 years ago you wouldn't think that it would be a thing, like an
Yeah.
academic and a gamer,
And a
and
gamer.
use this in the same sentence as like to make an argument for something. But let me just comment on that a bit on what you said, because there is something that stuck in my head the first time I heard it, and because you've talked about maritime communities kind of thing, and how to define humans through their maritime kind of, I don't know, perception or landscape or whatever. If you really think about it, and I'm sure you know where I'm going for here. If you really think about it, we are all part of this system, no matter where you are in the world. You may have never traveled a day in your life. You may have never left your country ever. But the t-shirt you're wearing probably came to you by boat. And the computer you're using probably came to you by boat.
Yeah.
So no matter how you think you're disconnected from the sea, you're really not.
Yeah, nah, sea gets you. There's a book that once again, shout out to Damien and all his reading recommendations, but it's called 17% of Everything, I think. And that is a book that it basically talks about this, the global supply network, and just the fact that maritime connections are still so important, and have always been so important. I think it's just one of those things where it was a very natural conclusion for me to come to after spending quite a long time, looking at interconnected communities, looking at the movement of goods, looking at trade in general. I find trade fascinating. I think we have to, you have to if you're an archaeologist to an extent, because if you're looking at where goods come from, that's, but it is also one of those things where I hadn't even thought about it as its own discipline until I ended up taking it, because I was like, well, that sounds interesting, because they couldn't run the module that I had originally planned on.
When it's destiny, it just happens.
And it just happens. It just happens. It was my destiny to study boats.
Yeah, boats are amazing. Why not study boats? Right?
And people.
Oh yeah. Anyway, but let's go back to video games for now.
Yes.
We've talked about that. So video games, something that 15 or 20 years ago, I know because I'm super old and I remember that time. So 20 years ago, the self-sarcasm, Jesus Christ, I'm giving you like food.
I know, right? I know.
I mean, I'm not doing myself any favors here. But anyway, video games was something that 20 years ago, it was something made for kids. Like it was something that kids did. And then you see the interesting thing that kids grew up, but they didn't give up on video games. I mean, I'm an adult, right? I'm supposed to be an adult. And all my friends play video games. I play video games.
Yeah. And I would push back on the idea that like video games were always just designed for children. Obviously, there was the perception of them as toys, but I think as long as there have been games, there have been, like if you look at the history of games, there have been games that are developed by and for adults.
Yeah, true, like Doom or something like that, you mean?
Even like Tetris, right?
Tetris was made for adults, you think?
Tetris was made for everybody. Tetris.
I mean, yeah, true.
Tetris has a very interesting story, but I'm not going to get into that now. However, if you want to watch quite a fun movie about that, there is a movie with Taron Egerton in it called Tetris, which is about the
real Tetris
rights to Tetris.
Wow.
It's actually very fun. I'm not doing a very good job of selling it right now.
Okay. We believe you. But anyway, point being that video games are a part of our pop culture just as much as movies and just as much as anything else, or this like podcast, for example, which is a point of cultural like heritage or something.
Yes.
Sure.
And I also think that so there was this great book that I read for my thesis. Shit, the name's gone out of my head.
Stop cursing.
I'm sorry.
Stop saying shit all the time.
Have I said it a bunch?
No,
just the twice.
You said it twice.
Twice is fine.
I don't think
twice is pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think saying shit is a curse though.
No. God, I've forgotten the name of that book. That's really annoying me.
You can send to me later. We can put it in the description. Something.
It's fine. But let me just start a sentence and then you can finish.
yeah, you can start the sentence. Go. Sorry, it was my fault. That was my fault. Go.
The thing about video games that makes them unique, I think, is the fact that they're immersive. So it is that real, like, you embody this character and you see through their eyes, or you play as them, you gain this like emotional attachment to them, and it forms what Landsberg refers to as a prosthetic memory. That was the book that I read this book for my thesis, and she was talking about museum installations, she was talking about films, but I think video games are a really sort of important site that where you form these prosthetic memories, where you form these emotional memories related to history and how you perceive history and how you think about events, because it's so much more real, and it's so much more real when you're an active agent in them. So I think it's actually really important for archaeologists to be on the pulse of what people are saying in video games. There's a book that came out a couple years ago by Draycott and Cook. It was edited by Draycott and Cook, called Women in Classical Video Games. Great volume, would recommend it. But in the opening, they talk about the fact that games, it's like more relevant than ever, especially because, you know, there's a lot of funding cuts and things like that. But games are the way that people access the classical past. They are one of the main ways that people access the classical past.
True.
Which is like, yeah.
They don't just access it, they live through it. For example, I don't know, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for example, it may not be the most accurate representation of ancient Greece, but you can walk in the Parthenon.
Yeah.
In the Temple of Zeus in Olympia, you can do it.
And Ubisoft do some really interesting things with that, because they've also released these exploration games, where you're not just doing it, you're like, they're developed to look at the site. They're developed with this immersive frame of reference. And so my thesis focused on games from the golden age of sail. My PhD would probably go back to classical games, just because even more so than with, I think, modern history, there is very much this like, but there was a lack of opportunity for education in the classical world, so you end up accessing it through pop culture, and video games are such a big part of that it's just very relevant, I think. It's very relevant.
Yeah. So can you explain to us a bit what is the golden age of sail, in case someone is not English?
Yeah. So the golden age of sail is approximately 16th to 18th century. When you think about it, you're thinking about the movement of ships basically out of Europe, exploring the rest of the world, touring. I can say exploring, that feels quite generous. There's a lot of colonialism, there are a lot of seafaring battles at this point. It is quite a violent time in a lot of different ways, but also if you think of a classic ship, if you think of like a large sailboat, that is from the golden age of sail. You are thinking about something from the golden age of sail.
Oh yeah, if you ask like ChatGPT, paint me a picture of a ship, a sailing ship, of a sailing boat, it will be that thing.
Yeah.
So if we were to think of a representation of it, what would be like Black Flags, for example? Is it golden age?
Yeah, Black Flags, the TV show, Black Flag, video game.
Video game, yeah.
Yes. Pirates of the Caribbean, that's the golden age of sail.
That's golden age, yeah.
You're thinking of these very ornate ships, basically, and people moving outside of Europe into the rest of the world, and the chaos that happened after that. But also just like this movement of empire. It's it very much happens. It's a technological expansion on the background of these like great empires that you see in broadly Western Europe.
Yes. Oh yeah, and I mean, I saw a couple of times. I think there's a video on YouTube was like how a 16th century sailing ship worked.
Yeah.
And it's like the levels, like the 5 levels in deck, the 5 decks, and then there's 16 sails, and then the 1800 rig like ropes of rigging going back and forth. And we have to, like, before I think airplanes and spaceships, like ships were the most like the peak of the spear of like technological advancement, and it was ships. It was the most technologically advanced vessel in the world, and they are so sophisticated and difficult to like understand how
and well designed,
super complicated machine worked. And then you don't only have that super huge ship that you had to sail, sail with the wind and take it to a certain direction. You also had this large crew of
Yeah.
cooks, privateers, people for anything, like guards and officials, and a whole bunch of people, and you had to like kind of monitor all those people. You had cannons on board.
Yeah.
It was a moving like fortress.
So ship of the line ships, that'd be probably what you're describing as a ship of the line, which means that it's about basically ships would line up and fire at each other, military ships. And they were described, first rate, second rate, based on how many cannons they had, how many guns they had on them. They are fascinating, and they are hugely elegant pieces of technology as much as anything else. They are beautiful. People love building them. I love thinking about model ships. I think that's another really interesting topic to think about, to talk about. I won't get too into it because we've already gone quite long. But
Yeah, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
It's all right.
There's always time to talk about like model ships.
I
Yeah,
love
anyway.
ships. Lego just put out one of the Endeavour, I want to say.
No, I know. So
It's beautiful. It's so expensive.
I know. That's the problem.
We couldn't afford it, nor would we have space to.
I will make space.
You'll
Okay?
make space.
I will sleep with it. I will put it on my bed.
Oh, you'll have a ship bed. Several rows. It's just the Lego model. Viewers at home don't know that you're actually 2 inches tall. You can fit on a Lego.
Yeah. I can fit on a Lego boat bed. I guess. Yeah, of course. I'm 80 years old and 2 inches tall. I am a hobbit.
Oh dear. But I do think that they were hugely elegant pieces of kit, and they lend themselves to these really romantic stories. You get Treasure Island. That's probably the peak of it. But every other story is inspired from. Because I think the thing that you need to remember, if you're dealing with media, if you're dealing with especially fictional representations of the past, you're not just dealing with the archaeological material. Obviously, people will sit and will look at when they create their designs for their games, they will be looking at archaeological material. They'll be looking at ship plans. They'll be looking at sites and things like that in order to make it feel authentic. Because that's what my thesis was about. It was all about authenticity in video games and how that reflects maritime archaeology. And how accurately that reflects maritime archaeology. And the thing you've got to bear in mind is they're not just borrowing from these like very real archaeological traditions, but they're borrowing from traditions of fiction and traditions of storytelling. So they're borrowing from a lot of different places that incredibly fascinating to think about, incredibly fascinating to engage with. I think that some of the inaccuracies will come from this place of like, we're not just talking about you're not just engaging with it as an archaeologist, you're engaging with it as a storyteller. You're engaging with it as a developer. You're engaging with it as someone who needs to make a game fun. It's a very like multifaceted approach to what a developer will probably consider like very linear, the way we describe sites. And obviously, when you're actually in archaeology, you know that there's a lot more complexity. There's a lot more viewing sites as multivariable spaces. It's much more layered than maybe you would first think. But I think there is definitely a perception of archaeology as a very linear, very, straightforward, very whatever discipline. And so I think we need to bridge that gap, because I think video games have this wonderful potential as, I don't want to say educational because that makes them sound right, but as, educational tools, right? If you will learn about, let's say, somehow AC Odyssey is your first exposure to Greek mythology. Somehow. I'm not sure that's a guy that exists, but maybe it is.
Maybe, yeah, you never know.
And you'll be coming across maybe figures that you've never heard of before. Like, you'll be coming, like, let's say you've never heard of any of the gods before. You're coming across Zeus for the first time. You're coming across all these temples and spaces. I mean, Stones Heraklion, sort of not a super well-known site, has been recreated in AC Odyssey. That is something that is really interesting to think about. I think there is a really interesting way. I think that there is a really interesting. There are lots of really interesting things you can do with archaeology and do with video games and the way they represent sites, but you need to be careful, because it is really easy to have people go for a very long time thinking that that just lots of things that weren't true were, like maybe the demographics of a ship. Now, we know that ships were hugely multicultural in so many ways because, if you're talking about like pirates and privateers, obviously there's a lot less direct archaeological evidence for that. But if you're talking about pirates, you're also talking about free slaves. If you're talking about just sites that are, ships that are reflections of empire, that are ships that have been developed in the context of empire, you'll often have people on them who are from the empire. Like, it's sort of, there's just so much to engage with that it would be super easy not to engage with. I mean, there are lots of games that do it very well. I just think that you need to be able to be in the room, you need to be able to communicate with the people who are making the games, you need to be able to articulate your research in an interesting way. It's like why I feel like sometimes I studied 2 games in particular for my thesis. I looked at Assassin's Creed Black Flag and I looked at Return of the Obra Dinn. And I really enjoyed playing both of those games. I think you wouldn't necessarily expect it because Obra Dinn is a 1-bit game, but you see a much more nuanced and interesting look at the past from Obra Dinn than you do for Black Flag in many ways. I think the thing with Black Flag is that it prioritizes aesthetics over content, and you see sites completely outside of context. You get to explore a lot of really interesting Mayan archaeology. It's fascinating, it's really interesting, but it's all in the wrong place. And you get things from Chichen Itza in Tulum. These things are not in the right place. And like sarcophagus, the lid of a sarcophagus is used as a door that you can put interactable objects in. And it feels a bit disrespectful, but also, if you're a pedant, it's just sort of wrong. It's not right. It's not, it's devoid of context. And I think so much of what we do as archaeologists is context. It's about, like, where was this found? Who developed it? We're interested in actually learning about people. And because I think that there are, both as from like an archaeological perspective, but also from a storytelling perspective, I think there are so many stories that are more interesting that you can interact with if you put things in their right place, almost. And also, especially because funding gets cut, or maybe you have a very unique opportunity because you have an audience. You can tell stories people aren't necessarily gonna hear in other places. If you're, as a great quote that I wrote in a review by, I want to say, MAGRA of Black Flag, which it's fantastic. And he says, if you are going to base sales of your game off this perceived sense of authenticity, you've got an ethical obligation to provide that authenticity. You have an ethical obligation to do some research about it. And I think that, maybe game developers aren't going to do that. Maybe they don't care, right? Maybe some of them don't care. But some do. Some do. And as archaeologists, and this is something I started looking at in my master's thesis, would be something I'd be interested to continue looking at in my PhD thesis. It kind of boils down to, how do we communicate in a way that is effective for both parties, and that leaves both parties walking away feeling satisfied? Because the thing is, if we can get more people to care about the field, you can get more people in because they played Assassin's Creed and they found it interesting, or because they fell in love with Time Team, or because you've done effective outreach. And I think video games are a really interesting way to do that, but also just more broadly, you need to know how your fields are being represented in order to, like, be able to communicate meaningfully in it, but also to keep it relevant, right? Like, it's no secret that archaeology struggles with funding. It's no secret that there are funding bodies and you're seeing archaeology programs get cut in the country. You're seeing lots of things like that. It's no secret that, like, the field needs to be relevant. Clearly, you and I will agree on this, right? Because we chose to study it. But we both think that there is intellectual merit to studying archaeology. It's like a given, right?
Yeah, sure.
We both think that, like, it tells you something interesting and important and unique about what it means to be human. And I think that unless you can communicate that effectively to people who are not archaeologists, then what is the point of our field? Then what's the point of doing the research? If we can't talk about it effectively, how do you... But you may as well not do the research, I think.
Oh yes.
I
Oh
think
yes.
as
That's my main argument to most like PhD students or professors, sometimes postdocs, doesn't matter, who literally for the life of them cannot give a presentation that people will actually listen to. And I'm like, if you cannot communicate your research, who are you doing it for?
Yeah, and I think more so with us, right, more so in humanities, it is that ethical obligation again. If you're doing the research, you owe the public to talk about it. And then also because it's very easy to do bad history. It's very easy to do bad archaeology. It'd be really, pseudo-archaeology. If you ever had me back on, I could talk about pseudo-archaeology all day. But I really do think that it's important to engage, it's important to educate, and it's also incredibly arrogant, I think, to assume that people are not interested in archaeology, that people aren't interested in stuff. The person I know in my life, and I know a lot of archaeologists, right? I know a lot of researchers, nature of the field, nature of my degree. I know a lot of people who've studied it. The person I know who is most interested in archaeology is my mate Dan's dad, who is not an archaeologist by any stretch of the imagination, but loves it. Talks to me all day. Like when I went up to visit, we had great chats about it, and he had things to say that were exciting and meaningful. And this is a man who's never had any formal archaeology training, right? And he just watches documentaries and he loves them. And like, yeah, of course he does, because it's interesting and because people care. And assuming that people don't care, or assuming that people who play these video games don't care about what they're telling you about history or whatever is just wrong. Like, if you go on the Assassin's Creed subreddit, for example, and you put in the keyword learn, you will get post upon post upon post about what did I learn from Assassin's Creed? Here are all these things I learned from Assassin's Creed that I would never have learned before. Here are all these things I've learned. And you get all these anecdotal stories of people, being able to navigate Rome, having played the earlier games. And it's just I think it is a beautiful opportunity to actually meet and engage with people where they're at.
Oh yes. And I mean, you mentioned before how there is a need to satisfy both the developer of the game and the archaeologist. And I don't think that should be hard to do, because archaeology, I think it's pretty beautiful and interesting by itself. It doesn't need to be changed in order to be appealing. It's appealing by itself.
And also,
that's the point of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are lots of people who share that, but also cannot access it. So Lucas Pope, who is the developer of Return of the Obra Dinn, he also developed Papers, Please. He's got a new game coming out. His game is fantastic. He's won, indie game development awards. He's like also just a really nice guy, really lovely man. I interviewed him for my master's thesis, and he is very lovely and he's very interesting to talk to. And as far as I'm aware, has no formal background or training in archaeology. But both his nature games have been historical, archaeological in nature. And we've talked about it, and we're talking about his development process for Obra Dinn, and he was saying that it's also access. It's like the book, he bought quite a few books and shitballing books, and he got to go see the Kaisark in Greenwich. Another great day out, would recommend it. If you like maritime archaeology, just dust about in Greenwich for a little bit. It's lovely. There's a lot of really fantastic maritime archaeology there. But he was saying that, at a certain point, the books get too expensive. The reference books get too expensive. I mean, I've been out of uni for a couple of months. I've not been out of uni for very long. But I'm really feeling the loss of that institutional access to things. And I live in the city where the British Library is, so it's not actually too tricky for me to go in and request books and engage with them,
Oh yes, of course. I feel very privileged that I can just walk down the road from the Institute of Archaeology just into our library and find whatever book I need.
Yeah.
And then I think of something, I read something, I'm like, oh, interesting. And I just walk down the street and go find the next book. Because I think academics kind of take that for granted. And we don't realize, sometimes, when I'm looking for a book and I'm trying to find it online or something because I'm bored to walk, shame on me. But sometimes I'm just don't feel like walking to the library, and I tried to find it online. And, you know, I typed the title of the book in Google or something. The book pops up and it's like 150 quid to buy it. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
150 what?
And I mean, there's a lot of ways we can talk about the structure of academic publishing, the way that doesn't tend to actually benefit academics that much. You know, we can talk about that a lot, but I also think that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the causes are. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the causes are, because the outcome at the minute is that there is a lack of accessible research for even those who are interested and who are willing to do the work. And there are some great foundations. The Value Foundation does work on this, so they connect archaeologists and game designers and historians and game designers, so they do a lot of really good work on that. But I think we need to basically figure out what is the most effective way for us as archaeologists to communicate and engage and talk to people who are not archaeologists about how do you get from a site or an abstracted site report to a narrative.
Oh yes, that's I think to me that's one of the most important parts.
Yeah.
Of being an archaeologist. And I constantly find myself thinking about it when I have to give a lecture or a presentation or something. And I just, you know, I have this paper of what I want to say. And like a couple of days before the lecture, I will just sit there and remove all the academic bits and bobs and details and like make this interesting, make someone interested. And if they're interested, they will go on and read the full published thing. But if you read them, the published thing that has all the bits and bobs and details and the numbers and the graphs and all the academic terms that we have to use, then they will you lose your audience. It's kind of a show, right? You give a show and you have to get them in. So let's say, for example, you have the opportunity like this. Here, you have a platform here, like through the MARE project and through this podcast. You have a platform and you need to talk to people. And the topic you are going to talk about is figureheads. What are you going to talk about?
So I am going to talk about, I looked at figureheads and how they represented women. And the representation of, we're talking about women in the Victorian era.
Wait, take a step back. Explain to us what figureheads are.
So you're so right. So a figurehead is, as the name may suggest, the statue that is on top of a ship, at the front of a ship. It's the figurehead. It sits there. It's normally a person. It's the head of the ship. So that's, you'll see them quite a lot. They can be animals, they can be people, they can be decorative. There's a lot of scope to look at them. And they are also part of a ship, much like ship names, that people don't really tend to think about. Or if they do, it's, again, very similar to ship names in your research, in that you tend to just see them as they are and not really engage with them. You're like, here is a list of all the figureheads, now I've done my research. Whereas I think there is a lot more interesting to say and to think about them. Because what you have there, this is the sort of time capsule of women. In my case, I was looking at women. Was doing a time capsule of how women are represented in this period, how women are seen in this period in the Victorian era. So I was looking at these. And so it's really interesting to sit back and look at all these portraits and say, well, there's a definite gap between which women are sort of very heavily sexualized, like we're talking completely naked, sort of strapped to the front of the boat, and which women are in their full Victorian regalia and are very sort of stern and are very, important, and which women are made to look beautiful and very much attractive, very much part of the Victorian standard beauty standards. And what you see is just a really interesting visual dynamic of basically the role of women in Victorian society and the different ways in which women can be viewed, and the fact that it isn't just like one static way, but it's lots of different, there are lots of different ways people can be interpreted. There are lots of different it's multifaceted. And I think sometimes it's very easy for us as, historians, people who studied the past, to go, well, women weren't treated very well. and that's it, you know? Or we'll talk about women, but we'll only really be talking about upper class women. It's like, oh, women had to stay inside and they weren't allowed to work and they weren't allowed to, you know, whatever. And it's like, well, that's never actually been true of low class women. And so I think what you see in these figureheads is just a beautiful representation of that fact. But also, as far as I could find, no one had really talked about them in like this. Even though, you know, you can talk a lot, there's a lot of very interesting things to talk about if you think about, you know, are women being sexualized? Are women being dominated? What does it say about the fact that women are being represented in this space that is very, where they're not typically allowed? What does
Oh,
it?
yes.
Yeah, because obviously women were seen as unlucky on ships. What does it say that a father who, like, oftentimes figureheads were the wives or daughters of shipbuilders, of the ship owners, the person who commissioned the ship, so the person who financed it. What does it say about them being seen as an extension of him? So something I found really interesting is real women, or women who were relatives of shipbuilders were afforded much more respect than other women or abstracted women or mythological women. And there's a term I coined in my essay that I referred to as proximal humanity, which I'm also calling but I've got a girlfriend syndrome, but I've got a sister syndrome, where you see that, like, women aren't people until it's a woman you know. And then she's allowed to be a person, which I think is one of those things that you still see, right? It's one of those things that's still pretty common. So it's just a really interesting sort of insight into that.
Oh, yeah.
Into that space.
May I add
Please.
how every ship is feminine?
Yes.
Every ship is a woman. They have women's names usually in the past. I think in the modern era,
we're in
that
Europe a bit more
changes.
up and down, but yes, it's still very common for that to be women.
Of course. And I read a very interesting chapter by Anderson recently about, he tries to explain why is the ship feminine? Why is it a woman? And he kind of like develops this very interesting theory of how the people on board saw the ship as their mother.
Yes.
And the sailors were the children of the boat. So hence the boat is feminine because it's their mother.
Yeah.
So it comes back to what you're saying of, like, a woman is not a woman until it's a woman I know.
Yeah.
And then they're allowed to be someone. A mother, it's my mother, so it's allowed to be there. But yeah, in a different way, I guess, in a more.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all about proximity to men. It's
true.
All about proximity to men. And I think that was a really, and it's, you know, one of those things that, you know, maybe it doesn't sound groundbreaking to say. Maybe it's, you know, well, of course, men who are closer to women are more likely to view them as people because they've actually spent time with them. But I think it's just a really interesting insight into the Victorian psyche, because you could very easily go into it and think, oh, I know how this song ends, you know? I know how the story goes. I am completely aware that, like, women are meant to be portrayed in a certain way, and the Victorians are very austere about sexuality, so they'll obviously be portrayed in this particular way. And then the first figurehead you see is like a woman with a kit out, just like completely nude, strapped to the side of a boat. The figurehead I'm referencing is of Amphitrite, and she's mythological. So there's another interesting, if she's not actually real, you can sexualize her. You're showing your domination over the sea. You're showing this and that, you know? Or the
Aphrodite, who is the wife of Poseidon, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
So there's another layer for you.
There it is. Oh, the onion runs deep. Lots of layers. But
Wow.
even the Cutty Sark, it gets its name from a poem, and this mad witch who, again, is partially nude and is reaching out, and is this wild woman. I just think that there is a lot more to be researched in that field. There's a lot more to be said in that field. I'd be very interested to continue, you know, talking and thinking about it. I mean, I have.
Oh, but we can do a part 2. This is it's always on the books.
Hey, let me know when you run out of guests. I can do a double part on figureheads and pseudo-archaeology.
Oh yeah, I will call you in the morning. We can stop recording at like afternoon, and I can have 5 episodes in like publish them one after the other. It would be amazing. It would be my full summer, sponsored by SAV. We've just like observed a kind of a somehow masterclass in how do you present research without going into the crazy details of like archaeologists we like to write in our publications, but keeping it interesting at the same time.
Well, I hope so. I felt like I maybe
no, that was. I'm so sorry to cut it short. I also like to keep the episodes at like an hour long.
Yeah,
we're reaching the 120. At the 120 mark. Yeah. Let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up, and let's.
Yeah.
I'm sure the people who will listen to this will absolutely fall in love with you and be like, bring Sav back again. Let's do an episode with Sav. So, do you have any closing remarks for us? Anything you'd like to say?
I think just that archaeology is fantastic. Isn't it great? Isn't maritime archaeology wonderful? And
isn't it great?
There's just so much to study, and there is so much that is interesting, and there is so much that so many people will find interesting. And if I'm lucky enough to get funding, if I'm lucky enough to be able to continue this, that is definitely something that I want to bear in mind. But I just think as archaeologists, we just should bear in mind in general. So many people find this interesting, and we kind of owe it to them to figure out ways to talk about this in an interesting and accessible way.